We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. Today our guest is Shannon Avery Briggs. She's a certified high performance coach, and she's going to tell us more about that. And then we thought that the topics that would be interesting to talk about today, she's going to share her story, which she calls herself a multifaceted survivor, which I find really interesting, and she'll talk more about that. And then also we're going to kind of touch on codependency. So welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me into this conversation. And I felt like the very first time that we met, it just clicked.
Definitely.
Totally clicked. So could definitely relate to what your goals are in regards to this podcast and what you want to do. And also just related with some of my experiences. And like I mentioned, or like you said, I call myself a multifaceted healthy survivor. And what that started with was I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I was married for 11 years to an abuser. I had 2 children with him. And fortunately, my boss helped me get with the employee assistance program. And I was able to get the help that I needed to actually get through that. And one of the things that I found myself probably about halfway through my leaving him was meeting all of these women that were really that were stuck in the cycle. And
Yes.
There was one woman in particular that really made an impact on me. We were friends, and I felt really close to her, but she had been married 3 different times. And the last all 3 of them were abusers. And the last one had tried to kill her.
Ooh.
And she had a horrible scar across the bottom of her neck where he had tried to slit her throat. And I was like, I do not want to be just a survivor. I want to be a healthy survivor. And so I came out of that and have never ended up in another relationship like that. That was back in around the 2000 timeframe. I have been married I married a man in between them, and then now have my current husband. But I've never ended back up in a physical and emotional abusive relationship again.
So you worked through your healing in order to not continue that cycle.
Right. And it was amazing. I remember the very first time I sat in the support group. The very first time they brought out a great big giant whiteboard and asked the group, tell us some of the things that your abuser does. And I was like, my eyes just were completely open, where I was like, what are they following him around? That they can describe him to such a T, about ripping the phone cord out of the wall and stuff like that. I was totally amazed at the commonalities of abusers. And so that definitely helped me have an aha moment too, to be able to get out of it. And I had the opportunity later to speak at their charity function and share, my story, as well as share how a lot of people don't understand why women will go back. And so I got to share about how it's like they are so charming and so talented at their skill of pulling somebody back in. It takes a while to gain the strength, and then you get sucked back in, and then you gain this a little bit more strength, and you get sucked back in until you can finally break free. And so I was able to do that. And after that, I was, a single mom of 2 kids and decided to go to school, was able to get my bachelor's degree in business management, and also went on to get my master's degree in organizational psychology and development. I really liked the people side, and there's a lot of behaviors that can happen even within the organization it's psychology. And so that really drew me to it. And it's been interesting how each of these steps in my life have kind of brought me down to where I am now with the certified high performance coaching. After I got out of that, I ended up marrying in 2008, I met my husband, my last husband, my current husband, and I didn't realize how sick he was. He was an addict for 30 years and was abused as a child, and started out with alcohol, turned into marijuana, went to cocaine, eventually was using meth, and had used meth for probably about 15 years. And I was naive at that time. And we fell in love, we got married. And within the first month of us being married, he relapsed. And so I was very committed to I could see who he was. I could see the real person beyond the facade of the drugs and the alcohol. And so I did everything that I could to help him with that. And so got him into treatment, and he'd been through treatment before, but we got to the point where we both hit rock bottom, as me being with codependency and him with his drugs. And he got to the point where he could no longer get relief from the drug. And so we now,
that's pretty bad.
Yeah. And so he knew that it was time to let go of it and to move on. And so from that time on, we made the agreement too that he has 0 chances. So even though he's been clean now for over 10 years, we have that conversation on a regular basis that we will not go back there. I will not go back to living in that chaos. So if he ever relapses now, it's done. We're not going to go back there. It was a short period of time after that, after he became clean, I discovered that I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I went through breast cancer, and I initially was like, let's just have the surgery. I had my business hat on. Let's just have the surgery and
don't put emotion in it
and move on. Just let's get it done and take it. But I kept getting pointed, in these different directions. And I shared with a coworker of mine, I was like, I'm going to go for a double mastectomy. I'm going to go. And she was like, no, don't do this. And gave me some recommendations for some doctors to research. And somehow I had ended up on a newsletter where I was getting got this newsletter about the truth about cancer. And so I watched some of those, and I was like, that's interesting. And I had another friend of mine that pointed me to a local clinic here. And so I started that journey of researching and finding out about what was possible and what I could do. And I started becoming curious about my own body and seeing what, it's like it had to get there somehow, and so something got turned on in my body. What can I do to turn it off to get the health that I needed? And so we started on our own journey. My husband helped me, grew wheatgrass in our extra bedroom and juiced wheatgrass, and we did juicing. We went vegan for quite a while, and by the time that I did do surgery, I was ready for it, and I knew exactly what I wanted. Because the worst part of that whole entire journey was to get the pressure from the medical field. When I was first diagnosed, I told the nurse practitioner, I said, I don't want to hear the results of these tests from you. I want to hear from my personal doctor that I've had for 25 years. And when, by that next Friday, she calls me and she goes, I know that you said that you didn't want this, but I knew that you'd want to know the results. we got to get you an oncologist, got to get you a radiologist, and pressure. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Let me process this. Let me
because just hearing that alone is going to take some time to process. And that's traumatic right there, hearing that.
Yeah.
And having the doctors pressure you.
Yes. So I said, look, I'm still going to have cancer on Monday. So, I at least need the weekend to process it. Yeah. Sure enough, she calls me back on Monday. Got to get you an oncologist. Got to get you in here to do all this. And I'm like, look, I need to do some research. And she goes, no, you don't. You don't need to do any research. You need an oncologist, radiologist, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And I said, look, I'm not going to die tomorrow. And I need some time to like really understand what I'm up against and stuff. So she left me alone for a couple of weeks, calls me back a couple of weeks later. And I had told her, like I said, I didn't want to hear from her. And originally she told me I had 2 tumors. So she calls me back in 2 weeks and I'm like, oh, what does she want now? What do you want now? So she calls me back and says, I just thought you'd like to know we had a second pathologist look at your tests and you actually only have 1 tumor instead of 2. And I was thinking, if you would have listened to me in the first place, we wouldn't be here. You wouldn't have to be calling me for this. So then she like right around starts, got to get you here, pressure. And I said, well, what about the nutritionist? And she goes, the what? And I said, the nutritionist. And she goes, well, if your oncologist feels that you need a nutritionist, they'll assign you one. And I said, nah, you have no idea. I will have a nutritionist at my table to help me through all of this. And so, so she hung up that day. That was the last time I did ever hear from her, which I was relieved. But I did, find my doctor, and he took me on a whole crazy path with looking at the emotions and having the difficult conversations and making sure of, you better know whose backyard that chicken's coming from. So looking at the quality of the foods, doing the organic foods and paying attention to, what am I washing my hair with? What am I washing my clothes with? So looking at everything in my house, inside me, what was going on my body, all of that. And where I was able to come to, find some answers within me that ended up being tied all the way back down to my childhood, when I was 5 years old, and healing taking what it took to heal those wounds. And that ended up helping me with healing the cancer. And when I was, like I said, by the time that I did have surgery, I was ready for it. And I knew exactly what I wanted. So the standard of care, for example, with lymph nodes is to remove several lymph nodes, all of them down your arm. And they have treatments now where they can actually inject a dye, and it will take it to the direction that if the cancer does expand, that they can take it right to those lymph nodes. So I only had to have 4 lymph nodes removed, whereas a friend of mine ended up having to have like 24.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And guess how much cancer they found in her lymph nodes?
Not much.
0.
They took that many?
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
And what brought me to tears was, even when they were doing the lumpectomy on her, that she had gone through chemotherapy and all this kind of stuff, and they couldn't find the tumor, but they still did the surgery. They still did a lumpectomy, and they did the lymphectomy, removing all those lymph nodes, and didn't find anything in the lymph nodes. And what I discovered later was that was the first surgeon that I had interviewed with.
Oh.
And I just started bawling, crying, knowing that could have been me. And she's a cake decorator, so she has to wear this sleeve now, because she suffers from lymphedema. So yeah, kind of, it was quite quite the journey. But
so you didn't take any chemotherapy,
no,
right? So tell us the healing part of this, because so what happened? I mean, they did the surgery.
So I actually waited. I was diagnosed in 2016, and I worked through like with some natural treatments and stuff. One of them was it was an experimental thing that they actually injected into the tumor, and it caused an opening. And it was gross. It was spewing out like, it caused an ulcer, right? That's a great description. But that wound wasn't closing and wasn't closing and wasn't closing and wasn't closing and wasn't closing. And my doctor sat me down and he was like, we're missing something here. This shouldn't be open like this and not closing. And so he sat me down and said, just talk. And so I rambled on about all sorts of different stuff or whatever. And at one point he looks at me and he goes, you realize that you deserve help. And I went like this.
Oh, he hit something.
I literally turned away from him. And it wasn't like I was upset or anything like that, but my body turned away from him. And so he just sat there patiently. And then a few minutes later, I start jabbering on again and again and again. And then he goes, you realize you deserve help. And I did it again, turned away from him. And so we finished our conversation. And the next day I needed to go in for a physical exam where he could look at the wound and stuff. And I went in, and he was from a different country. So he had a really, really strong accent, and he comes in, rah, rah, rah. I'm like, what are you trying to say? And his nurse goes, deserving. Do you get deserving? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And we finished with the physical exam, and I go into his office, and he says, you had a completely different demeanor when I said that to you. He says, you believe that you deserve to be sick. You believe that you deserve to have cancer. And it was like I felt a shift inside my body, like my subconscious. I felt something physical shift in my body. And as if I could have been knocked over off the chair, like I'd been hit by a 2x4 or something. And I walked out of that office that afternoon, and it's as if there had been like a plant in that wound. And like when you pull out a dandelion and all the roots, that's kind of that's what it kind of resembled like to me, was having something ripped out by the roots of this wound. Yeah. And it was excruciatingly painful, excruciating. And I'd been documenting this wound with pictures every day and every night. And that morning I had taken a picture at 8:00 in the morning, went to this exam, felt like I got hit by a 2x4, walked out, had that excruciating pain of feeling like this had been ripped out, went back to rebandage it at 2:00 that afternoon, and it had shrunk by half.
That's amazing.
So it was that deserving, really getting that understanding, having that little click. And receiving. So from that moment on, I just took off health-wise. I got better and better. People were like, what is going on with you? What's changed? What are you doing? And I kept up the, doing the eating well and making sure that I was drinking clean water and exercising and the emotional, the meditation and the journaling and all of that. I kept that up, and then also looked at, some of those broken pieces from beyond. Because the thing that even triggered this whole conversation with him was he had given me the assignment to go have those difficult conversations with the people in your life that you need to have those conversations with. And I went and talked to my sister-in-law prior to this this conversation with my doctor, and I had told her, I miss you, because she said, I'm going to be there for you this whole entire treatment and all of that. I'm going to be there. She wasn't. She just disappeared. She had her own stuff going on, but I wasn't judging her for that. I wanted to tell her that I missed her, and flipped out on me. She got really upset, and he had taught me, sit back and observe, see what's going on. How do you feel about it in your body? What's coming up? Are you feeling fear? Are you feeling different sensations? Just watch it as if you're watching movies. So I had done that, and then the next morning I had a migraine, and that's when he had asked me to coming down and have a conversation with him, was after this migraine. And then he asked me about he mentioned the deserving and stuff. So I had tried a couple of different things naturally to address the cancer, and topically, and it came to a point where I had made the commitment to myself, if it doesn't get to if I don't see a difference like in 9 months, then I'll commit to the surgery. So I made that commitment to myself. And so 9 months came down the road, and I went into the radiologist, and he came in, and he'd been fighting me for almost 2 years. Got to have surgery, got to have surgery.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But he also respected me. So I really appreciated that he was willing to do that. So when it came to that appointment, he says, will you please talk to a surgeon? And I said, yep, I will. I'm ready for it. And I found out later that my surgeon, who was actually absolutely perfect for me, had introduced herself to him the day before.
Oh, wow.
And so it was like the right people at the right time. Always when when you put yourself out there at the and open yourself up to allowing the energies in the world to guide you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where all of that came from.
And today, so how long ago was that when that happened? When did that happen?
So 2018 is when I had my surgery. So this November, it'll be 5 years. Yeah.
Nice. And cancer-free.
And the last few times that I've gone in for the exams and stuff like that, they're like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's working.
So nice. I also did no tamoxifen.
Oh yeah.
Or a Remedex. I did none of that, because I was like, why would I want to turn those hormones off? And instead of really looking at how I might be able to rebalance them instead.
Right.
And so I chose not to do that. And I also talked, it's like some of the side effects of those medications can actually be cancer.
Yeah. Right.
So I wasn't going to go there.
Yeah. Some of those side effects are very dangerous. Worse than having the cancer sometimes.
And messing with your head, the emotional.
Oh yeah.
Because it messes with your hormones and stuff. So
yeah. So very interesting. So I was thinking that do you mind if we switch gears a little bit?
Nope, I don't mind at all.
Okay. So let's talk about codependency, because there's a lot there. And what fascinates me is, from the description, you have struggled with that. And then with your current husband, you were able to work that out. So there is not a codependency, because there's a perfect storm set up here for codependency, right? I mean, with everything. And yet, I guess let's talk about what codependency is, and then how you were able to stop being codependent and move forward in the relationship to have a healthier marriage.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the domestic violence there for a second, because that is where I definitely saw codependency firsthand and just full blown, because he had threatened to kill me and the kids at one point in time, ended up in jail. And we had gotten back together at that time. I came home and found out that he was in jail. So he didn't even tell me that he had court that day. And so I find out he's in jail. And so I do typical codependent thing, right? I go to the little Circle K on the corner and buy a couple of 40 ounces and go home and get blasted. Got totally wasted. Called my boss in the middle of the night on her work phone, said, call me in the morning. And so she does. She's like, what's going on? So I share it. And I'd been with the company at that point in time for 29 days. And so she had enough foresight to realize that I wasn't a loser.
Yeah.
And told she's like, what's going on? And I said, I can't come in, I'm still drunk. And so, and that's when she had me go to the employee assistance program, and I got better there. And so that was part of it, you know, at that point. I learned even more so going into John's addiction, about things that I was, you know, that I was doing, things that I trusted him with. You know, he was good. He would like, he'd swipe how we still have our house is a miracle in itself.
Really?
Because he would, I had given him a debit card that he could use on a very specific bank account that I could put money in, and he would turn around and swap it. And he would take and clean out the bank account that was paying all of our bills and stuff.
Yep.
And so I had to learn different techniques of kind of tightening the reins on that. I also, when we got him into treatment, you know, I made sure that I went to those meetings and learned what I could about his addiction. The other thing that I held him accountable, and also when he got out of treatment, and this might sound like it's all pointing the fingers at him, but it was a partnership, if that makes sense. So he came out of treatment and started going, oh, well, I'm brain damaged from the drugs. And I said, no, we're not going there. You are not going to limit yourself to that. You're underestimating the power of your brain. And so by doing that and seeing how well he did with that, also helped me to hold him accountable and to continue in celebrating his health and just not playing into it. I went to Al-Anon a couple of times, but for me, I found my own personal, like working with the types of things, like with the high performance coaching, even though it wasn't given really a name for me until this last year. The same type of things that I was doing with the journaling, with like figuring out and looking at the relationship and what can we do to make improvements and not get stuck in the chaos and the drama of it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. There's so much drama in that, and it completely takes your attention away from what really needs to be focused on. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's still times that I can see when he's not 100%. He'll probably never be 100%, you know, with that. So there's still tendencies that will flare up on occasion, and he'll kind of get hyper focused on something and some of those characteristics. And while I was going through the cancer, he ended up, here's another survivor story, but he fell off the back of his truck and broke his back to the point where he came this close to being paralyzed.
Wow.
And with that, he ended up with brain trauma. Because of the brain.
That doesn't help.
No. Because of that, he has a tendency to be on the he can get agitated a little bit easier, especially if it's something that he doesn't want to do.
And it's frustrated easier.
Yeah. And so we have to continue to, this last weekend I was sharing with you about my closet collapsing.
Yes.
And having to put that together, put it back together. He's not a handyman type. And so that kind of stuff really, really frustrates him. And we came out of this chaotic weekend. We had almost everything that could go wrong with the help go wrong. It could have been worse. We could, you know, we don't have huge holes in our walls or anything like that.
Your house is still standing. That's about it, right?
Yeah. The closet pieces are up and stuff like that. But the emotional experience with it was draining. And that's one of the things with codependency too. It can be really easy as you are drawn, as you know, you get caught up in this drama of what's going on. And so then you get tired. It's exhausting.
It is
whether you-
exhausting. Yeah, before we started the podcast, we were talking about that. And one of the things that you said, and I loved, and then it took us on a conversation that I really wanted to pull in here, and that is planning, right?
Mhm.
So you share what you shared with your husband about helping him manage his frustration.
So we know I did everything that I could in this situation where I ordered everything. I mapped out the closet and ordered everything, ordered a quote professional that came, but it didn't end up being a professional. So we come and it's frustrating for John to have the unprofessional professional.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that he gets frustrated with that kind of stuff anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ends up being a barky
Mm-hmm.
guy, where he gets grumpy and he's snapping at people. And so that drama, once again, kind of takes that energy down.
Yep.
So afterwards, after we got through, he was like, well, we can't order from here. We can't order from there. And I was like, no. That what we need to do is have you really, really look at knowing that a house project is a trigger for you.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that it's a trigger for you, practice how to manage those triggers.
Yep.
So that you can prepare prior to it. Is it meditation? Is it journaling? Is it envisioning what the closet's going to look like when you're done?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just using the closet as an example, but envision that.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how you want the relationship between us to go through that experience, and really, really think about that beforehand, rather than setting your mind that I hate doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm gonna whine about it, and I'm gonna be a grump about it, and I'm gonna do everything that I can to
fight it the whole way.
Mhm.
That would be me.
Yeah. It could have been a lot different if we would have done that. So
right.
So he definitely is. He's my best client. He's been such a success with everything that he's gone through, and is such a trooper and continues to work. So even though he does have a setback with what we did, we had a setback this last weekend with that. Having him be willing to listen, and I also have to do that. I have to take a look and go, what could I do differently, so that we can face some of those challenges together and have it be more successful.
Yeah, that's interesting because someone else's trigger can also trigger us, right? So we're trying to manage that, and then it gets exhausting. And that is something that I am learning. So I've become much more aware of my triggers, which is amazing. It's so empowering because I recognize it, and then I'm able to manage it much better. The next step I'm working on is, so I get triggered, right? And I know how to bring it down. What I'm now learning is when someone else is triggered, and then that triggers me. Because there's just like a franticness to it, and and going into this stuff planned, because I can kind of identify with your husband, because if I have learned that if I have to do something that I don't like, I have set myself up in the past for failure, because all I focus on is, I don't want to do this, I hate this, I don't like, just the negative part of it, right? And I actually learned this over the last year. And so then, of course, if anything goes wrong, I'm already at a place of being frustrated. So it just takes me over the top. So then here we go. This thing turns into a major ordeal that is exhausting. And I learned that over this last year with a lot of technology. Seemed like every time I tried to do something, it was never easy. And so I got to the point where I just didn't want to do this, but I had to. Right. But I couldn't come out of it at the end of the day, excuse me, exhausted and over the top, maybe angry, frustrated. And so I've learned that I have got to get my mindset straight. And if I'm tired that day or whatever, I'm a little off and I'll wait on doing that.
Yep.
Because I'm already setting myself up for failure by that, right? But it really taking the time, and instead of focusing on how frustrated I get, I focus on, hey, I'm learning something new. It's kind of a mind shift, right?
Yeah.
But it's huge.
Yeah. The other thing too is like making sure to evaluate afterwards,
Yes.
you know, and
Process it and evaluate it. And
yeah, and set a time clock for your pity party.
You are allowed to have those, yes. But
Yes.
you're right. I'll say to someone, you're allowed to have a pity party, you're just not allowed to stay there.
Right, exactly. Because that's, the other thing too is like being paying attention to yourself and your energies enough that it's like, okay, if I do need to take the rest today to regenerate and get myself back and do take care of myself, do some true self-care, rather than, and that doesn't mean like going on social media and doing a bunch of shopping or anything, but do something that's like really, really caring for you.
Yeah.
So that you can be ready to get back on quicker, rather than have it set you back for a half a month or set you back for a month.
Right. Managing it will shorten that little suffering time of it. Yeah, it will, and bring you back. And that's the thing. And I probably am going to say this in every single episode of my podcast, because I can't say it enough, is that self-awareness is key. That is absolutely key to healing and to growing. And slowing down and paying attention to how our bodies are reacting, because what you were describing earlier is the trauma that happens to us as a child does get stored in our body. We do need to get it out of our body. So the codependency. So I do like to touch on that, because people don't even really, that's codependency. I was full on into codependency, and you become an enabler, I call it. You get into this codependency relationship, and you were describing some stuff that I can remember. You were saying about your husband that you were trusting him with stuff that, I don't know, how did you say that you were kind of trusting him with stuff that maybe you shouldn't have, and it wasn't handled. Yeah, I did the same thing. And then I didn't want to know.
Yeah.
I didn't want to know. Oh no, it's got to be fine. And I got myself in so much trouble doing that.
Yeah. One of the things that you reminded me of too, that especially with I was trained so well to be codependent. I wasn't allowed to have a voice.
Oh yes, we could go down that road. My voice got shut down. Yes.
Yeah. And there's still some relationships that I'm working on right now, that I was just this last year, I was visiting with family, and I was starting to share this story about how my mom had sent me to live with my sister, and because I was a problem child. And when I came back to the house, I had gone down to my room after being away for about 6 months, and she had turned my bedroom into an office and didn't bother telling me. And so I no longer had a home. I no longer had my safe space. And I was trying to share this experience with one of my siblings, and I started telling her, and I got super emotional. I was really surprised. I mean, tears were just coming down my face, and I've talked about this before, so it was really surprising me that it was being that I was being that emotional, that kind of reaction. And in the middle of it, she shuts me down and says, "But look at it from their perspective. Look at how mom and dad must have felt." And it's like, what does mom and dad have to do with, yes, they were part of it, but so it was like I wasn't even allowed to express what this situation
your
did
sadness, how it made you feel.
Yeah. It's always like, well, look at what you did to them. Look at what, how you, when you were growing up and stuff. So that tied into a lot of the codependency too, as I was in the domestic violence situation. And then even, although with my current husband, it was more of, with my first husband, it was more like I wasn't allowed to put the furniture the way that I wanted. I couldn't I couldn't hang pictures where I wanted. I'd get up the next day after rearranging the house and he'd put it all back, and so with John, it was different, but it was similar in that I wasn't allowed to like really share some of my deep feelings because he couldn't handle it.
You thought he couldn't handle it, or he really couldn't handle it?
He chose not to be able to handle it.
Okay, got it.
And that's something that we continue, even like if we talk about the closet thing too, it's one of those things that we continually have to work on to be able to, for me to be able to tell him, this isn't okay for you to get, how behave this way with the closet. I wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to say that without him being able to have a safe space for me to actually speak up.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up about the voice and the codependency, because I had the same problem, and I didn't even realize the depth of how my voice was shut down. And I realized it one day when my current husband and I were dating, and we were just having a conversation. It wasn't anything threatening or anything like that. I mean, he's not that kind of guy. And I went to say something and it wouldn't come out. It literally stopped in my throat. Yeah. And I could feel it. I could physically feel it. It didn't quite hurt. And this was the first time I realized that my voice physically shut down. I hadn't paid attention to that before. And he looked at me and said, just say it. And I looked at him and said, it won't come out. And that was kind of the first time I realized it. And then my girlfriend Liz, who she's actually the person with me on my first episode, her and I've had that conversation and she recognized that as well. And it took time and a safe place, right? And then recently with my husband, this is interesting. There was a slight disagreement, because we don't argue at all, but there was a slight disagreement. And I must have felt, I remember when the situation happened, I got up and I just stepped away, because it was one of those times I needed to process, and I wasn't angry. I was just trying to process. And I was in the bathroom and I was brushing my teeth or something. And all of a sudden my throat hurt, excuse me, so bad. It literally felt like someone was choking me. It was the weirdest sensation. I have never had it quite like this.
Wow.
And it was so intense. I can't even tell you how painful it was. So I'm like, what is going on? And I just felt in me, you need to go say that. What was in my head, right? You need to go right now, and you need to go say that. And he has created such a safe place for me. And I was scared, because I just don't know how they're going to react, right? Even though I know this man. And I went out there and I said, okay, you know what it is I want to say? And he said, yes, I want to hear it. And as soon as it came out, that pain just released. I have never experienced anything like that, but it absolutely shuts your voice down. Your voice can absolutely be shut down. And as soon as you don't, it may not be that it's not a safe place, but if you're not feeling safe.
Yes, exactly.
It's huge. And I know I'm safe with him, and it was fine. It was totally fine. But I think my body, the only thing I can think of is my body reacted because I was shutting it down. And my body's like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that. You have a voice, you need to go say it.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating. It reminds me of the open wound a little bit too.
Yes. Yeah.
That was definitely an emotional thing. So
exactly.
And that was one of the things that was so powerful too about my healing journey, was being able to manage the emotions much better rather than be enslaved by them.
I was just going to say, rather than the emotions controlling you, which is so true. If you don't watch them, they will control you, and you feel helpless.
If you don't know how, if you don't know how to like look at them. And so now it's like I look at them so differently. And with some of my clients, I'll talk to them about how they are one of the most beautiful communication tools that our body has to communicate with ourselves.
Yes, it
You
will
know,
tell you. You just
yeah.
have to listen. You have to be aware.
Mm-hmm. And that has been like so freeing. Because through all of this too, I had been on antidepressants. I had suffered from depression for years and years and years. And it wasn't until I went through the cancer journey where it's like dealing with all of this stuff, the domestic violence, the John's drug addiction, as well as the cancer, as well as the childhood traumas and stuff like that, that I was able to learn how to pay closer attention to those emotions and not be sucked in by them, and not be afraid of them, be curious about them instead of being afraid of them.
Right, because they're a message, right? The thing that what comes to me is I used to be afraid of the emotions overwhelming me and taking over, and I would lose control. It was always, I gotta stay in control. I gotta stay in control, especially crying. I was afraid if I started crying, well, what if I don't stop? Right.
Yeah.
And really crying is a pressure release. You really need to cry. I mean, I sit sometimes and I listen to like some good music during meditation, and it'll bring me to tears. And it's cleansing, and I feel so cleansed afterward. I used to run from that. I would shut that stuff down in a heartbeat. No, can't tap into that.
Yeah. And then like the what I get a lot of times too with my clients is, oh, I'm sorry that I did this. I'm sorry that I felt that. And it's like, no, you don't have anything to be sorry for or ashamed. No sorries needed.
No, absolutely not. Sorry needs to be, that is something that I've worked on over this last year, is really watching it, because that always came out of my mouth, even if it's something I didn't do, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
And now when I say I'm sorry, it's because I really am sorry, because I have a reason to say I'm sorry, and I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't apologize all the time.
Yeah.
It's so empowering.
It is, isn't it?
All of this is empowering when you are able to manage your emotions, manage your feelings, manage your responses, right? It's empowering.
Yep. And it's different managing versus controlling.
Yes.
And when you're managing your emotions with authenticity, there's so much more depth
and
to
grace.
that. And then if you've got that very steel structure of control.
Right.
Because I can totally relate with the control thing. It's like I had to control everything. I had the nickname from in the past as CEO of the universe.
You've given up that title? You don't have that title anymore?
I kept it. I did keep the the CEO of the universe, but now I have compassion with it.
Right.
Instead of like, this is the way it's going to be, and we're going to go it's going to be very, very structured. Instead, I want to be a leader.
And it's interesting because I can remember the exact day and the exact moment and the exact situation where I realized I am not in control of anything but me.
Yeah.
And actually, I had a full-on tantrum. I'll confess. I had a full-on tantrum. I remember sitting, I could tell you exactly where I was at in my living room. And it was my first husband and I were going through some stuff. We were separated, and I was frustrated. It had been going on for a long time. And I just realized I have no control over this. And I was angry. I was so angry. Nobody was home, thank goodness. But I literally stood up in my living room and I screamed and I cussed and I cried and even had a little tantrum, and then got over it. And since that day, it's been so freeing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't have frustrating times, but I don't have that in me anymore, that I know I can't control you. I have enough work right here just trying to control this, right? This is my work right here. I'm not going to go outside and try to control anybody else, but it's so freeing. It was frustrating at that time, but once I understood, then it became very freeing. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, that was when you were talking about that too. I kind of was thinking about some of the things during because John was using for about 5 years, our first 5 years.
And you didn't know.
I did know.
Oh, okay.
By then it was I found out early on.
Okay.
And what ended up kind of setting him back though too was he had surgery like within probably a month after we got married.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course they put him on painkillers.
Oh,
right?
they screw everybody up. Oh,
They put him on painkillers.
Mm-hmm.
They'd give him so many refills, and then he'd go
Mm-hmm.
back for the final refill, and the PA would cut him off,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd relapse onto street drugs.
Right. Go to street drugs. Where else is he going to
Go
go?
to street drugs
Mhm.
until he got hurt, or he would create some kind of situation,
Right.
and then would end up in the emergency room,
And get his
end up
pimples.
and maybe end up having to have surgery. I mean, he shattered his elbow. He had to
Ooh.
have surgery on his knee. He had
Sounds like me.
he had carpal tunnel. I mean, I think we ended up with 9 surgeries within 3 years of our marriage.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And so he would end up in this cycle though, where they would give him
Mhm.
the pain meds, and he would go for that last refill, see it. I mean, it was just this cycle
Sure.
of over and over, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to as codependency again is like trying to control
Yeah.
all of that situation.
Yep.
And it wasn't until, John was like, I don't have control of this. And I was like, I can't either. And had actually told him that he needed to leave. My daughter told me to give him one more chance. So that's the only reason why he's still here. He's still here. And that was a miracle in itself, because she did not care for him.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like, Mom, give him one more chance. And so that was my sense, I guess, of like, just I'm giving up my control of that situation. And so he did end up, when he broke his back, he'd been clean for several years by then, and but he absolutely had to have the pain meds. The doctors would.
Oh yeah.
He had to have
I've had
it.
two back surgeries. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so he was able though to come out of that with flying colors.
Yeah.
And was able to manage it. And I helped him with it to keep track of what he was doing. But other than that,
yeah,
it's like a normal person, you'd want to do that anyway.
Well, I did that actually, because when I went through my 2 back surgeries, the second one was much more intense. They actually put hardware in my back. And so, you're in such a stupor when you're taking those meds, and those, they scare me, because opiates anybody can get addicted to in a heartbeat. It's such a different strain as opposed to the other drugs. And so it scared me. And so my husband helped me, but I literally wrote down, every time I took the medication. And it's a good thing, because I remember thinking, oh, I took it just, 5 hours ago, and I look, and I took it, an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Well, and like stopping the enablement was huge, too, with us. And in June, I've seen how far he has grown. John has, because I don't think you knew this, Lisa. John's son died in June.
This past June?
Yeah, 2 months ago.
Sorry.
It will be 2 months ago tomorrow. That he died from a fentanyl overdose.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry.
And so we saw too back then, one of the things that we saw with him, because he lived with us for a couple of times, the other side of the family didn't hold him accountable either. And so when we bought him a bike, he lied to us and told us that it had been stolen, when actually he had turned around and sold it for drugs. And they didn't tell us about that. And so there were things that we could have done back then, way back then, that possibly could have helped him, but anyway, John has been able to handle, his losing his son, and actually turning it back into reaching out in the AA. So he's become a sponsor. He's a sponsor with AA and NA. And eventually he also wants to become a certified high performance coach and incorporate the two with the NA and the AA trainings, is along with that certified high performance coaching in helping others. And so the things that we've been able to work and grow on together has gotten both of us through this situation. You know, I wasn't very close with Tomas. He'd been gone for quite a while and stuff, but still having your spouse's child pass away, it definitely can affect you.
Absolutely.
And being worried, there was only like, hey, let's do check-ins to make sure that you're staying, you know, are you having any urges and stuff like that. And so fortunately, no. And he's been, you know, going down to the AA meetings and the NA meetings and offering himself to them to help them and letting them know, you know, losing his son, the last thing that would benefit him would be to relapse.
Yeah.
You know, he said the story that he kind of uses, he goes, it's as if somebody would have, you know, if a person, literal person would have murdered my son with a gun. And if I were to go up to them and give them a hug and thank them, that's what it would be like for me to relapse at this time. And so he's been able to, you know, stay strong and even with the chaos of the closet this weekend, you know, with all of the and stuff. Any of those could have been triggers, you know, for either one of us.
Sure.
And so he's been able to stay clean and I don't feel like I have to walk on eggshells too.
Oh, it sounds like he has grown and healed a lot, because if that doesn't trip him up, I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm so sorry.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Wow. That's impressive. And he's taking this sad situation and trying to make the best of it and pay it forward.
Yeah. So I'll be completely vulnerable here too.
Okay.
So what ended up happening at that point, he has a daughter as well, and we were estranged from her. There were some things that had happened. And so when Tomas passed away, we made sure that she was aware of it. We made arrangements to have her and her daughter stay with us during the service and stuff like that. So we were there for a few days, and I hadn't talked to her, I bet, in 4 years. It had been 4 years that we hadn't talked to her. John had kind of here and there had communicated with her, but for me, they had written me off. And one of the things, especially going through the high performance coaching and learning about that, I found myself going, oh crap. Because it's like have those conversations, have those difficult conversations and stuff. And I was like, I realized that I was staying in the victimhood. If I stay in the victimhood, I don't need to address the problem between us. I can go, they did this, 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 and this, and this.
Yes.
And I'm the victim here. And so it really took some humble pie.
Yeah, it's hard.
Take a look and go, you know what, if you want to be authentic and be congruent in who you are and what you're trying to share with other people, that means that you have to look at this kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. So. Is that relationship being restored, or?
It is, yeah.
Nice.
So like I said, we did have we spent like several days together. They live in a totally different state, so it's rare, but I'm seeing baby steps where she's like, tell Shannon hi, you know, and so there's some communication, you know.
Good.
So yeah,
it's interesting because I've had situations like that as well, and when you're actually really authentic and you really have the heart of wanting to do the right thing, it's amazing how things can turn around really quick. And the focus anymore isn't on what you did and what you didn't do. It's how can we make this work?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
You know, you're never going to get anywhere, you know, if you're pointing the fingers, right? But if you come and you say, and you're just authentic.
Yeah.
That's when they go deep.
that was definitely an eye-opening thing, where it's like, I can't go around and say, offer forgiveness and do that if I wasn't willing to do that myself.
Right.
And I didn't even realize that was the other thing too, is that I didn't even realize that I had put that on there, put that on our relationship, that it was just kind of like, it's done, and the door felt shut. And so it was like, well, they're just not in our lives. And then having Tomas, pass away, and have that door, hey, it can open again.
Interesting. But you were aware. See, so there's self-awareness. That's how you heal. That's how you grow. If you did not have that self-awareness, who knows what would have happened that day?
Right.
It could have been really uncomfortable.
Yeah. It was kind of strange at first, but then, but then we were fine.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything, sharing your story, sharing the multifaceted survival stories. That's incredible.
Thank you.
And as you're sharing it, I'm thinking, gosh, you know what? I kind of have similar. I am too. Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, it's interesting, and you learn and grow from each one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now as a high performance coach, what I do is work with people to have them look at themselves. I basically hold a mirror up against, up for them, so that they can gain clarity, gain influence, having that, like what we were talking about, with having that, not have our voice stuck, having an influence and being able to speak up for ourselves, as well as, how is their productivity, how is their energy, what are you doing? Because like with this thing with the closet, it's like, it did draw my energy. And so what are the types of things that I can do that I can bring that energy back? And so those are some of the things that, it's a very structured approach, yet it's structured, but it's adaptable. That's what was so cool about it. And when I was working with my doctor, with the cancer doctor, it wasn't until I went through the coaching myself that I was like, holy cow, this is basically what he did. He just didn't have the structure to it. And I just saw how beautiful that it always helps you meet you where you're at, and work on the things that you're willing to work on, and also having that mirror going, oh, I need to work on that.
And giving yourself a lot of grace too, because we can tend to be really hard on ourselves, and you don't want to spend the energy being hard on yourselves. You want to spend it on, okay, this is what I have. How do I change it? How do I fix it? How do I improve it?
It's how do you rewrite those questions or those statements to yourself, so that you're not being hard on yourself, that you're actually looking at the situation from a different perspective, so that you can, so that you're not draining, but you're actually building yourself up.
Right. I know the one theme in this podcast that you and I are talking about is the energy, and how, we can preserve our energy, or we can dump our energy on situations. And you really need, I know for me and for you, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, that it's hard to bounce back from that stuff. And, and so if you can get ahead of it so that it doesn't get away from you and drain you, you're going to spend less time trying to recover. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
So tell everybody how they can get in touch with you if they would love to hire a high performance coach.
So they can go to my website, which is www.luminous-connections.com. And there's a strategy session. You can click on the button for a free strategy session, and you get a free hour where we you fill out a questionnaire and kind of tell me a little bit about you, because that way we're not wasting a bunch of time like asking the questions. It's like getting some of those questions early, so we can dive deep and actually do some coaching like right away.
Right. Get past all the fluff, that getting to know each other. And
and luminous connections to me. So one of the things, the cancer journey for me, what it did was it reminds me of the kintsugi vase.
The what?
Kintsugi vase. So do you know what kintsugi is?
No.
So it is the Japanese art form of taking broken pottery and gluing it back together with the gold, silver, or platinum adhesive.
Mm.
And
I'm sure I've seen it and just didn't know the name.
That was one of the things that it kind of resonated with me about taking all of those broken pieces that I've had throughout my entire life and going on this healing journey and bringing it back together so that I actually have a life that's more beautiful than what I ever could have expected.
Yes. Yes. Beauty from ashes, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I can say that about myself as well. And it keeps getting better. That's what my husband says. It keeps getting better.
Yeah.
And he's right. He's right.
It does. It definitely does.
I remember when he first said that to me, we were first dating, and it just keeps getting better. I'm like, why are you so positive? And now I'm all over that. I am in complete agreement. It keeps getting better.
Yeah. And what's fun too, especially if you do journaling and take notes. I love to go back and take a look and see the growth that has actually happened in that period of time. It always blows me away.
And that's really important. That is a really important point, is that sometimes people feel like, oh gosh, I don't feel like I've grown. Just take a minute and think of where you were 5 years ago, you know, a year ago, 6 months ago. Because I can definitely see the times in my life where I've had a lot of growth. And it's very clear. And I don't ask that. I don't have that question anymore, but for a long time I did. And that's exactly what I did, is I would stop and I'd think, okay, where was I 5 years ago? Oh, I was in a very different place. Okay. So there is growth, not as much as I wanted, but I could see the growth, and that would motivate me more.
Yep. Yeah. And then like taking that and looking at, what do I want? Where do I want to be?
Right.
And what would that feel like? And what's the necessity? What's the necessity behind it? What's my why, behind that as well? And what am I willing to do to get there?
Knowing where you want to go is huge. And if you don't know, you need to sit down and start figuring it out, because otherwise you're just going to go through life. You're not going to have the destination you want. Yeah.
That's where, like, especially like the clarity pieces of the coaching that I do, that's what is really key about it. So
yeah, I interviewed an actual clarity coach, and that's an episode coming on. It's really interesting. It's very interesting. Yeah. So clarity is huge.
I look forward to listening to that one.
Yes. Yeah. She'll be one of I think she might be episode 8. I'm not sure, but yeah, she's interesting. Very interesting. And how I met her was interesting. I met her on TikTok, and I shared this, and she had talked about the video was, she came home from school. She was 16, and she turned on Oprah like she did every day at 3:00 in the afternoon. And John Bradshaw was on. Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
And he did the inner child, I call it a vision, visionary. And I had never heard of it. And so I watched it. I was so blown away. And so I reached out to her, and we totally hit it off. And then I said, I'd love to have you on the podcast. And that was one of the things we kind of talked about. But, it's part of the inner child work, which is what, and right at the time that I saw that video was right when I was really beginning to work with my little Lisa. So it was really powerful.
Oh, I bet.
It was really powerful. Yeah. You got to have a big box of tissues when you watch that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
My little Shannon goes by Cleopatra.
Cleopatra.
I know, it's funny.
Well, thank you so much. It was great having you on. I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing and giving all of us your expertise on being a high performer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I look forward to learning more from you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.